Welcome everyone to Monday Morning Morons for July 2nd, 2018. This week, let's begin in the salt mines. Or perhaps this time I should call it a case of supreme butthurt. A case. Supreme as in court. It's a double... whatever, forget it. Liberal professors livid over Janus ruling. They're referring to Supreme Court case Janus versus American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees Council. Let's pull just one little quote out of the decision that kinda cuts to the heart of the case so we know exactly what we're dealing with. The state's extraction of agency fees from non-consenting public sector employees violates the First Amendment. Forcing free and independent individuals to endorse ideas they find objectionable raises serious First Amendment concerns. As you'd expect, there's a whole lot more to this opinion, but it'd take us hours to go over it all in detail. I encourage you all to do so on your own time if you like. Link to the actual decision is in the description so you can read exactly what the majority and the dissent actually say. Supreme Court cases are sometimes fascinating and are rarely as cut and dry as media portrays them to be. Dissenting opinions too, actually. Frequently, the dissent isn't based on opposition to the ruling so much as opposition to the reasons used by the majority to support the ruling, or opposition to what one justice perceives as a vague standard imposed by the majority that is more likely to cause future confusion than clarity. Such was the gist of Breyer's opposition to the wedding cake decision. He was of the opinion that the majority was making up a vague standard which will only lead to more confusion, not less. But let's stick with just one case. In this case, we see that the court not only overturned the Illinois law, but also overturned a prior Supreme Court decision. Abood versus Detroit Board of Education, 1977, upheld the establishment of these fees, which, if you read far enough, is the basis for Elena Kagan's dissenting opinion. Quote, "The court's decisions have long made plain that government entities have substantial latitude to regulate their employees' speech, especially about terms of employment, in the interest of operating their workplaces effectively. Abood allowed governments to do just that." You should absolutely read the entire dissent before you form your own opinion of what she's just said, rather than taking my word for it. But this was the most troublesome part for me. She seems to be of the opinion that it's perfectly fine for the government to regulate your speech in the vague interest of harmony in the workplace, which, in my opinion, is the exact opposite of the First Amendment. Fortunately, the majority disagrees and Abood was overturned. Which should be a little warning for everyone blathering on about precedent. Precedent is a powerful thing when it comes to the court because they choose to act that way. But prior decisions are not written in stone. Just because 5 people 40 years ago said something doesn't mean they were right. That's why these things are called opinions, not Supreme Court facts. Their opinion can be overruled in the future. While they frequently avoid overturning prior cases because, let's be honest, that would just become a freaking madhouse, they still can. Really, the court is probably the most fascinating of the 3 branches of our government. Okay, so I'm weird, sue me. Anyway, back to the article. The American Association of University Professors is condemning the recent Supreme Court decision to overturn a law requiring non-union employees to pay fair share fees. The ruling in Janus versus, I'm not going to fucking say all that, ends the practice of charging fair share fees to non-union workers who are covered by the collective bargaining agreements negotiated by their respective public sector unions. Union leaders had argued that the fees were necessary to prevent free riders from taking advantage of union benefits without paying membership dues. But the plaintiffs in the Janus case successfully argued that the practice amounted to forced speech and association in violation of the First Amendment. Okay, so here we see the heart of the case. The union is using the Abood case as a starting point because precedent. That case and that court agreed that non-union members benefit from the union's collective bargaining, so they should pay their fair share of fees even though they are not members. They even send non-union members, well, basically a bill that outlines just how much money they owe and itemized how that money is not used for their political activities. Thus, according to them, you are not paying for their political speech, just the collective bargaining. However, as Justice Alito points out on page 41, how could any non-member determine whether these numbers are even close to the mark without launching a legal challenge and retaining the services of attorneys and accountants? Indeed, even with such services, it would be a laborious and difficult task to check these figures. Arguing with the union's numbers is essentially impossible. There is no reasonable way for you to verify these numbers, and even attempting to do so would be quite expensive. In other words, the union could be completely making this shit up, and you'd have no reasonable way to refute it. The AAUP, a national organization that represents college faculty members, declared in a press release that the decision is a broad assault on public institutions and the common good, saying that while it is unlikely to affect many college faculty members directly, it could complicate the efforts of AAUP chapters to function as labor unions. The statement, written by AAUP President Rudy Fichtenbaum, argues the decision will roll back protections for working people, lessen public support for civil building blocks such as education, and diminish the ability of unions to have a positive impact. Noting that AAUP chapters that have been formally recognized as unions take our advocacy a step farther by negotiating legally enforceable contracts that incorporate AAUP principles. Fichtenbaum asserts that the ruling makes their job more difficult. Yep, exactly what I'd expect the union to say. The sky is falling! The sky is falling! We're not allowed to take your money without your consent anymore! Funny, isn't it? In any other circumstance, we'd call that theft and extortion. Imagine if Microsoft made you pay them a monthly fee because you don't want Windows. Same idea here, but because it's a workers' union? Oh no, that's totally different. Maybe Bill Gates should have declared Microsoft a workers' union, huh? We will continue to say loudly and clearly that strong universities and well-educated citizens are essential to our survival as a democracy, the statement continues. That's why our work as educators, union members, and advocates has never been more important than it is now. It's not your work as educators we're questioning here. It's your work as mob bosses extorting our money to pay for your political brainwashing that we object to. Focus on being a workers' union instead of a political action committee, and more people might be willing to pay union dues. You won't have to force them to. All right, let's move on. Professor, GOP would dominate if the right wing weren't so racist. A Georgetown University sociology professor slammed conservatives last week, arguing that the right wing would dominate the U.S. political landscape if they weren't so racist. Professor Michael Eric Dyson offered the blanket condemnation of conservatives during a June 22nd discussion titled The Black Experience in Today's America, organized by Washington Center for Internships and Academic Centers. During the event, the academic claimed that if the right wing weren't so racist, then it would be able to exploit a vote-rich terrain that would swing this nation to become more conservative. However, because of their racism, they continue to disallow themselves to understand what they have in common with minority groups, he argued. In a statement to Campus Reform, Dyson elaborated on his argument, claiming that many black people are culturally conservative, even if they're politically progressive. Given the points of moral agreement that many black folk might have with conservative white folk, it would behoove white conservatives to forge connections with those black folk of like mind. However, due to the persistence of profound pockets of prejudice, bigotry, and racism in right-wing ideology and conservative belief, those connections are effectively curtailed. I'm going to skip right over your Trump derangement symptoms and just address this part because I both agree and disagree with you. In today's political climate, indeed, conservatives would be cleaning house, so to speak, if the people had any idea what each party actually stands for. Of course, the reverse might also be true, if the political parties actually adhered to the core principles they claim they are about. Let's take conservatism first. The core beliefs, or the 4 pillars of conservatism, if you prefer, are liberty, tradition and order, rule of law, and belief in God. Now, liberty is simple enough. Conservatives take that from the Declaration of Independence. They believe that individuals have the right to life, liberty, and property, and freedom from restriction of arbitrary force. In other words, free will to follow your own dreams and do as you like so long as you're not imposing on others. Second, tradition and order. A bit more complicated there for American conservatism because tradition would preclude the Declaration of Independence in the first place, right? The establishment of a free United States directly opposed the tradition of the British monarchy. So, what do we really mean by tradition here? Human nature. They believe in the ability of man to build a society that respects individual rights. Faith in mankind's better intentions might be a better way to phrase it. We are naturally inclined to form an orderly society for the benefit of all. Chaos and instability doesn't benefit anyone. Third, the rule of law. Conservatism believes that you must have a set of laws that are understood by the individuals and that those laws must be applied equally to all. No one is above the law, no one is below the law. Simple enough concept to understand, I think. And fourth, belief in God. No, this does not mean the Christian God specifically. It means a God, a higher benevolent power from which concepts like fairness, charity, justice, and duty come from. Now, taken all together, that doesn't sound much like the Republican Party, does it? That's because the Republican Party are not conservatives. They pick and choose pieces to fit their own political goals, just like Democrats do with liberalism. Let's look at the core principles of liberalism. A little easier on this one because there's only 2. Number 1, individualism. Sounds just like conservatism there, doesn't it? Liberals believe that individuals have inalienable rights simply by virtue of being human beings. Sound familiar? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Again, straight out of the Declaration of Independence. Except for the Creator part, which I suspect was included to appease conservatives at the time, the belief that all men are born with certain rights unassailable by the state is a core liberal concept. Some of those rights were purposely enshrined in the Bill of Rights for fear that future generations may not understand exactly what they meant. Amazing foresight by our founding fathers, as you can see today, many people do not understand what they meant. Number 2, egalitarianism. Important to note here that the egalitarianism liberals believe in is that of equal opportunity, not enforced equal outcomes. Doesn't sound much like modern Democrats now, does it? That's because today's Democratic Party are not liberals. If you were to take 2 people who hold these core beliefs, that is, one conservative and one liberal, stick them in a room together and have them discuss political ideology, what you'd find is that they actually agree on a great many things. But if you try the same exercise with a Republican and a Democrat, you will find that they agree on just about nothing. Why is that? Because both parties are more interested in power and winning than they are in anything else. They do not hold to these core beliefs because they desire to shift and change as rapidly as possible with the political winds. This is exactly how you catch both parties contradicting themselves. This is exactly how both parties end up chock full of hypocrites. They stand for nothing. They have no principles. They only seek the power to impose their will on others. Neither are conservative nor liberal. They are both authoritarian. Now, why do blacks as a demographic consistently vote Democrat? because Republicans are racist. No, because narratives. Republicans spent decades poisoning the term liberal. Now the masses believe this word is synonymous with communist. That was the point. Republicans want you to think Democrats are evil communists, so you won't vote for them. It worked. Although, if you ask me, rather than standing up to oppose such claims, Democrats these days chose to embrace it and become communists. But whatever. Democrats similarly poisoned the word conservative. They heaped claims of racism upon Republicans for decades, conveniently ignoring their own, by the way, and now the masses believe the entire right side of the political spectrum is founded upon racism. They've successfully flipped history right on its own head and convinced people that the founders of the KKK have changed. And it's now the party of Lincoln, the party that legislatively freed the slaves and passed the Civil Rights Act, that are the racists. That's the power of persistent propaganda. People far too busy living their own lives simply do not have time to verify every bullshit claim made on television. When history fades and is forgotten by the masses, the few rewrite it for their own benefit. Perception becomes reality rather than truth. This is the state of American politics, and this is why blacks keep voting Democrat. They believe the right is racist because people like you keep telling them that. The truth is, the right is no more racist than the left. The left just won the propaganda war in the media. Ask yourself, which of these following statements is racist? Number 1, everyone can succeed on their own. They do not need special programs, privileges, or advantages. They are all capable individuals who are free to pursue whatever dream they choose. Or, number 2, people of color need quotas to get into colleges, affirmative action programs to get jobs, and taxpayer-funded loans to buy housing because they need white people to help them succeed. Now, which one of those sounds like the Democrats? Do you still think they've changed? Or do they still believe blacks are an inferior race who are incapable of succeeding on their own? Look behind the rhetoric and listen. They're telling you what they believe. Okay, so I'm sure you've all got lots to lecture me about on that one. Go right ahead, but before you do, let me clarify something first. Links to these definitions, description, whatever you want to call them, are in the description if you want to read them for yourself. I do not claim to be an expert of political philosophy here, so of course there's plenty of room for disagreement. I just chose these two because of the way they presented their information. If you find these definitions or core principles inaccurate, well, argue with the people who wrote them, not me. I didn't write it. No, seriously, when you discuss these two words, you're bound to get all kinds of political bias thrown in. So I just went with the ones who at least tried to leave personal politics out and stick to a factual, straightforward kind of definition. These two words are philosophical concepts. So, of course, they're kind of difficult to sum up in a neat little list. Plenty of nuance and finer points get left out when you do that, but I had to start somewhere. Also, let me clarify what I believe before anyone starts constructing straw men to argue with. I believe there are racists on both sides of the political aisle. I also believe there are anti-racists on both sides of the aisle. The racists tend to reside further out toward the extremes of the political right and left, and they are relatively small in number. Despite their rather loud bitching and all the media attention they draw, most people do not agree with either of them. Most of us occupy a position somewhere closer to the middle of the spectrum. Our differences may cause friction and an endless amount of political bitch fights, but those differences are relatively minor in the grand scheme of things. Most of us can agree on at least some core principles like individual freedom, the fair application of law, equal opportunity, stuff like that. Most of us want the same things. We just disagree on how best to achieve them. Most of us. Not all of us, but most of us. And while we're all collectively branded as dirty, filthy, indecisive centrists, we know the truth. The far right and the far left are both fucking nuts. Okay, now you can type your nasty comments and try to pick a fight with me. We've already gone a bit long this week, so let's skip to the toxic masculinity, Bob. And don't give me the machete rape story either. Plenty of coverage on that one out there already. Pure bullshit. I've got nothing else to add to that one. Sisters arrested after stabbing each other in mutual combat, police say. 2 Wisconsin sisters are in jail after stabbing each other in a fight in front of 5 children on Sunday, according to police. Police arrived at the sisters' home in Madison around 12 p.m. on Sunday after one of the siblings called saying she was wounded. Madison police said in an incident report that both sisters suffered arm injuries during the incident. The sisters were uncooperative with officers, according to the Madison Police Department. Detectives added that the sisters, 23 and 24, will be charged with domestic reckless endangering safety. Both siblings engaged in mutual combat and sustained non-life-threatening injuries, police said. A third suspect, a 30-year-old male, who allegedly caused the fight, is at large. Well, hell, Bob, you're not even trying to stump me anymore, are you? Well, it says right there in the story, caused by a 30-year-old man. Allegedly. Listen and believe, Bob. If these 2 women, victims, say a man used his evil patriarchal power to force them to stab each other, then by the gods, that's what happened. Lock him up. How dare he misuse the all-powerful patriarchal mind control trick to cause these 2 helpless victims to hurt each other? You will knife each other. Okay, let's wrap it up with something funny. Squirrel caught stealing cop's donut in viral video. Insert joke here. Police in Alaska said a hungry squirrel crossed a line after getting caught swiping a donut. The Anchorage Police Department shared the video Sunday of someone tracking the bold rodent as he darted through a sea of squad cars with his treat. The squirrel ultimately hid underneath one of the vehicles. Seriously, he stole a perfectly good donut from a cop, the police department wrote on Facebook. That's straight up felony. Also, it's rude. You see, feminists, sometimes jokes about stereotypes are funny. Even the cop saw the humor in it, because he's not a victim whinging about his oppression. He's just having a laugh. You should try it sometime. That's it for this week, folks. Remember the social justice mantra: women are victims, men are oppressors, and feminism is just about equality. I'll see you all next time.